What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Behind the Door podcast with Brandon Brown and Jeremy Hiltz. We're going to talk about kind of a difficult topic today. I think it's a topic that'll resonate with a lot of people, a lot of listeners, but hopefully a topic that'll kind of make people, question the functionality of our prison system. Because today we're going to talk about kind of the effects on family. We're going to start getting into this topic a little bit more in future episodes as well, but I think today through Jeremy's experiences and some of my recent experiences as well, I'm going to talk about what it's like to try to parent when you're caught up in the trappings of the criminal legal system, and just kind of like the damage that incarceration does to families, but also just some of the real raw and vulnerable stories of trying to parent from within the system. And, Jeremy, I know you've shared before on previous episodes a little bit about your story, but I think really important just to contextualize for people, the part of your journey through prison that involves fatherhood.
Yeah. It's a deep thing as a father or a mother to be incarcerated and I think about it a lot in terms of how many other people that I was incarcerated with were also parents. We're also trying to do the same thing. One of the things that if you're a parent, that like it's the lack of control when your kids need you to help them. Like if your kid's in pain, it's a human experience, right? Everybody's going to go through it, whether they're your child or not. And there's some situations in life that you have no control over helping them. You know what I mean? Or like if they're gonna get their feelings hurt, right? Like everyday life things happen, right? And pain is involved in the human existence, right? So you're really. You don't want your kids to feel pain though, as a parent,
Yeah.
But when they do, you really don't have any control over that. You can help them get through it, right? You can do a lot of things, but the pain is theirs, right? And being a parent while you're incarcerated, the things that you can do for your children to help them get through it, like give them a hug or be there for them or talk to them and all that stuff, that's not happening. You know what I mean? Like you don't have, that's gone too. You know what I mean? So really, in a large part, what you have is, if you're lucky, you might have some phone calls or if you it's really about you're just completely segregated from your children at that point, and it's a very, very helpless and powerless thing, right? Because me being a father, I'm there's nothing that I wouldn't do for my children. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing that I wouldn't do for my children. And when you say that from prison, like what does that look like? Because there's literally nothing you can do to keep them safe. You know what I mean? To be there as a parent, to play your role. There's really nothing that you can do for them. So you have to find ways to accept that, you know what I mean? And really for me, what I had to do was say, I need to be a better person. I need to start down the road of being a better man so I don't ever have to come back to a prison cell again. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you had, like, your daughter was born. Talk a little bit about that, about the timing of your daughter's birth.
Yeah, my daughter was born, the day that she was born was the day that I started, was the first day that I was in the Supermax, the solitary confinement. And, it was probably, it easily is the worst day, was the worst day of my life, but also the best day of my life despite that too. You know what I mean? And it was the worst day of my life because I was feeling this particular pain, but it was the best day because my daughter's life started. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And today I'm grateful, you know what I'm saying? Because I look back at that. That's like a check mark in my life. And I don't know if she knows it, but like that's what I look back to and say, this is how far I've come. You know what I mean? This is how far we have come, you know? So it was difficult to say the least. So the first time I met her, it was in the the visit booth at the Supermax. And so there was probably, there's probably 24 inches of glass there. You know, it's like it's thick, and
Yeah.
I saw her from the other side of that, and you get to hold on to these little, very, very tiny moments there, and that carried me through. Like seeing her for the first time, like carried me through that whole thing. I got something to look forward to. I got to keep moving. I got to keep my mentally stable in here in the Supermax, because I go from the visit thing where I see my daughter, and they did a documentary on the conditions of the Supermax when I was there. It was like pretty. It was right at the same kind of period of time, and it was hell in there, and banging on the wall, the doors banging, the chaos of that. And I got to see my daughter for the first time, and then I'm walking back down through that, and it's like, but that just gave me I guess I was like, man, I just got to stay sane through this. You know what I'm saying? I just got to get through each moment, and then I'm going to get back out there to, you know what I mean? I'm going to,
I mean, it's like so important that, your story is unique in some aspects of like the dichotomy of that, right? Like to have, you are in the Supermax, like in one of the worst environments that you can find yourself in, on probably the most beautiful day of your life, like what you track back of, like, finding that gratitude even in the hell that was the solitary confinement. But it's like also important to talk about that. I don't think a lot of people in the world really think about the ramifications of incarceration on families, right? Like we believe that you commit a crime, you did the crime, you do the time. And we don't think about the fact that you're not the only one doing the time.
Well, the punishment is the process that happens for your kids is not talked about when you get sentenced that day. This you and your child, everybody's getting sentenced to the same thing, and but it's I've witnessed the damage that it did to my daughter, being separated from her, and understanding the relationship that we have, how important it was in her life. It's you don't really get an opportunity sometimes to share that with your children, right? Like a lot of people don't want to talk about their experience when they were away, or what that experience is done. But I think for us and our relationship with my daughter and my son, I was able to tell them about what it was like for me. You know what I mean? Like get honest with them, and they would share what it was like for them. And we talk a lot. I was just talking to my daughter about this before I came. I went to later on down the road. I went to this program. It was doing this like long distance dads program, and we used to read storybooks. And they would send the storybooks and the recording of us reading the storybooks to my daughter, and how impactful that was for her. You know what I mean? She's, you know what I mean? Like how that kind of made her feel, because it might not have been, in some ways, it might not have been the best thing for her, but like in some ways, it was probably you know what I mean? Kind of kept me with her a little bit.
Because it was something. So it might not have been the best thing.
It was something. Yeah, but it is also like the she was young. She's like, why can't I just see my dad? Why does he got to read these books to me? You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? On a tape. You know what I mean? That's the only time she got to hear my voice, because there was family dynamics going on in there that, like, prior to going to prison, I was unsafe. I really shouldn't have been, around my kids at the time, and I was, you know what I mean? I needed to be slowed down a little bit. And so when I'm, so I wasn't talking to them, as much, really at all. So that was the only contact she had. She was getting the hearing the recording,
Yeah.
So and she know we were going to talk about this today. That's why I was telling her about it. But then that's what she brought up, though, is that her memory of the books being read to her.
Yeah. It's something that I've always thought about, and in 13 years of being inside, I knew thousands of guys who were fathers, and I knew thousands of different types of fathers, right? I knew the guys who were the ones that wanted nothing to do with their kids, or maybe they wanted something to do with their kids, but they just didn't have the capacity to figure out how to do that. Like if you think about all the stories in our country about fatherhood, like I knew people who had abandoned their kids, but then I also knew people who the only thing they thought about, the only thing they cared about was like how you talk about it. Like, man, I have a kid out there, and I've realized that like the things I've done have separated me from my child, and they have to be the reason that I'm going to change, and everything in between. And, while I was inside, I thought a lot about this, and now, being outside, I think a lot about it too. Like there has to be healthy ways for our system to create avenues for parenthood. And I think about it in the context of motherhood and fatherhood in prison is so much different, right? There's so many different barriers and obstacles and narratives. But I think about what you just said, which is like the only real interaction that you had with your daughter was reading a book to her and then sending the recording home. And that breaks my heart, man.
Yeah, it does. And this issue is so complex, right? Because where did you learn where did this father learn how to be a father?
Yeah.
Right? Where did this mother learn how to be a mother? And for a lot of us that have been impacted by the system, there was something else that was going on before that, right? That brought us to prison. So like if there was a lot of dysfunction going on in the home, and you never really learned how to be a parent, right? Like that, your role models. You look around what the role models were when you were growing up, and are those good examples about how to raise young men and women, right? And so I know for me, like being at when I was young, right? Like I was 21. I think I had already done a prison sentence. I was 21 years old, and I had just gotten out of prison when I before I had my daughter, right? Well, I was a kid. The formative years of my life were spent incarcerated, right? So I didn't know how to have a relationship. You know what I mean? I was like, looking back on it now, I'm like jammed up in this trauma cycle. You know what I mean? And I'm having a child because I think that's what I'm supposed to do, because everybody else in the block had a kid and they had their kids coming to visit them and all that stuff, right? Like that was part of the process. And a lot of the men that I knew back then that were having children, it was like a badge of honor to have 3 or 4 or 5 kids, baby's mother. You know what I mean? Like that's how it was. Like that's, and so like you come in and
that's what you're taught. That's what you learn.
This is what you're taught. This is where it comes from. So and once you hit that moment where you realize that I have to be something different, I have to be, and that is going to take like probably some mental health counseling to take a look at how I got here to fix all this trauma that happened first, right? Or at least acknowledge it, to have some kind of awareness around it. There has to be, a reunification that's healthy for the child and for yourself, because I know the biggest thing that's happens to me as sort of being a father, was being aware and understanding my own trauma and how I dealt with that. So when my kid is inevitably going to have his own trauma come up in his life, he's going to know how to process that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you can't do that for your child, you're missing the mark, right? You can't, that's what we have to find acceptance around when we're in prison is like, my job as a parent right now is to fix myself enough so that I can be there for my kid. I have to acknowledge the trauma that I've caused in my child's life, right? First and foremost, right? Like I did these things, and I am accountable for not being in my child's life, you know, and that hurts. But like I gotta deal with that. You know what I'm saying? I have to deal with that because if I don't deal with it, who is going to be the father to my child? Because if I don't show something different, my son, what's he gonna have to look up to, and he's gonna make the same types of choices, you know, and that's not what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
So, the reason I said all that was because when you said there has to be some kind of programming in here, it has to start with mental health. It has to start with treating the individual and like having a conversation with people and you know, saying like, yeah, we had this long distance dad's program in there, which is cool. But it didn't go that far. It's like surface level stuff. Yeah, reading the book, but like, what was the impact that had on my daughter? You know what I'm saying?
And how can you find ways to like when especially when children are young? But I think honestly part of like being human is like connection, physical connection, like close proximity connections. And I think about all the time like what I would see when I, you know, with guys who are trying their hardest to be really good fathers from the inside is like this disconnect from access is the thing that you opened up talking about, right? Like everything that's important about being a father with that physical proximity is something that you completely lose when you go to prison. You know, you're shipped away hours away from where your family lives. Getting your kids there is an obstacle. Talking to them on the phone is an obstacle because the phone is expensive. And so now you're a financial drain on the family system just to maintain contact and communication with your children. When I got to the prison, it was 33 cents a minute to talk on the phone. 33 cents a minute. So if I had a child when I went to prison,
that's too, you can't afford it. You can't talk to
there's almost nobody that can afford that, you know, and on top of the fact that you got a kid and you got to pay for their school supplies and their clothes and their bills and their food and everything. And so I think
so let's be clear about that then though, Brandon, is like, when you get sentenced to prison and you have children, you also being sentenced to having a child that you can't father.
Yeah, and also your child is sentenced to prison as well, and your family is sentenced to prison because now if you were the breadwinner for your family, now that financial security is gone, and so like I think it's so important to talk about these things because, you know, when we talk about incarceration,
I want to just be clear about this too, though, is that like most of the time, I would say this, I don't have any data to support this or whatever, but most of the time people are going to prison and their father, they probably weren't the breadwinner of the family already. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I mean? Most of the time substance use is present, right? Like when somebody's going to prison or something happen that's been a financial drain probably to the family, and lots of times they're estranged. You know, we're estranged from our children prior to even going into the system. You know,
but and even in those instances, right? Because you said something really powerful and really vulnerable earlier. Was that like before you went to prison, you weren't the safest person to be around your kids, for your kids to be around. And so for me, it's like, regardless of the situation and regardless of the circumstances, we need a society that has healthier people and healthier families and healthier parents and healthier kids. And so like, when I think about the damage that the prison system does on families, it's because of all of those things. Like, how do we actually bridge the divide to make that possible for you to father and for people to mother from prison? How do we actually create resources for kids to be there in person and experience that physical connection required to build that really strong bond, especially with younger kids? And it's like, we have to talk about this on the podcast.
Well, I think it, for me, and this is like a big wish list, but it's like, why does all these parents have to be in prison? Like, what is going on here where everybody has to be in prison, and like some of this stuff can't be resolved in the community.
Outside of prison, 100%.
Right, like it doesn't. So when you say, how do we get this closer in prison? Like, there's a number of barriers for, like, let's say, a single mother to get the kid to the prison, right? Like, there's too many obstacles for that. There's too many logistical things, right? Like, and when the mindset is that this is from the system standpoint, these are criminals, right? Like, they need to be separated. They need to do their time. They need to be separated from society, right? And that's the only thing that would change, is if we said that, not all these crimes. So not all these crimes are going to be. You have to be separated from your kids, because
prison is not the answer.
It's not the answer. It's just not the answer for, especially these substance use related issues. Like, if a person is brought to prison for something they do while they're in active use, they don't really necessarily get all the help they can for that. And then the shame of being away from your children is going to grow while you're there,
chip away at you.
And then you have a undiagnosed or an untreated substance use issue on top of a growing well of shame, and then recovery from that coming out is just going to be. It's almost impossible. That scenario is almost impossible,
because substances are what you've used to mask the shame and those feelings, and you come home and it exists even stronger, and so it's
a ridiculous cycle.
And it's like you're bringing up a really good point, and I don't I guess both conversations to some extent need to exist. Is how do we stop using prison and mass incarceration as the solution to some of our social problems that it's actually making worse. Right? Like, we're breaking up more families, we're traumatizing more families, we're doing all these really horrible negative things through our dependence on incarceration because of the separation it's causing in our communities. But even in the event that we, because that's a big picture, we want to definitely stop sending people to prison for every little thing, and start understanding that some issues are not issues of like morality or good and evil, right? Like, you didn't choose to use drugs when you were 11 with your grandfather.
Well, there's safety issues that are going on, right?
Yeah. So some people, firmly believe that there's people out here that need to be segmented from our society to keep our society safe, and that might be true. And even in the event when we do that, that doesn't mean that the families should suffer as well, though,
exactly.
Right? So we have to find ways. Because even you said, like, of course, for a single mother with 3 kids, it's logistically impossible to sometimes bring the kids for visits every week and to, transport back and forth and afford everything. So, like, all of the hundreds of millions of dollars we spend in 50 states to incarcerate people, and we can't take some of that money and create programs that actually support families to connect while people are in prison. Because to me, it seems like a no-brainer. That's a way to begin a reentry process into healthier families and healthier communities.
I'd really be interested to hear the perspective of somebody that has been a child going to visit their incarcerated parent.
Yeah.
Because we can have these conversations, right? And we, sometimes I think we got to listen to the person that has walked into the visit room to see their parent.
Yeah.
Right? Like, has been like
or their child.
What's that?
Or the person that's walked into the visit room to see their child a bunch of times.
Sure.
I mean, because that family component is important too.
Well, yeah, I think from the perspective of a fatherhood, right, is like one of the hardest things for me to like accept, like pridefully was the damage that I was doing to my child. Because I always thought, like, I ain't hurting. That my whole thing was I ain't hurting nobody else, right? Like, I'm gonna live this life. I'm not hurting nobody else. But once you start accepting like the damage that you're actually doing to your kid,
yeah,
and like that is like some of it too. Is like what going into, let's just say, the Maine State Prison, it's not a warm, welcoming environment for children.
For anybody.
But in particular, for children, into the
yeah.
visit room at the Maine State Prison is not always like the easiest thing. And like, you know, if something goes, you have been there when something goes off in the prison, in the visit room, and there's like, the visit room has to shut down immediately, and like people have to get separated. No one knows what's going on, and your child is going to be a part of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So having an understanding about what the impact is to the children is like, I think the most important part of the conversation.
And how many parents with a partner in prison like are hesitant to bring the child to the prison because they understand fundamentally that that's a traumatizing experience.
Yeah, it is a trauma. Like I was saying, so for those of you who don't know, that in the Maine State Prison, there's the lobby to the Maine State Prison is right there, but sitting right next to it, wrapped in a lot of razor wire and is the Supermax, right? So it's these two buildings are right there, razor wired out and stuff like that, and this is where you're going to reunify with your child. It doesn't necessarily, you go back to like the trauma, right? The treating the trauma in order to develop these healthy relationships. It creates it, and it leaves an impact. And you see, I can't describe. I don't know what it would be like to see your parent or your child or whoever that is wearing the same blue shirt as everybody else in the place,
and thought the rules are ridiculous. Like your kids can't play, they can't talk to other kids, you can only have so much physical interaction with your child at the visit room table. You can only embrace your child or your partner for so much time, like a clock, and there's an officer dressed in basically police clothes that's sitting up on a podium watching over everybody. The whole experience is traumatizing for everybody involved, but especially for young people who don't know how to come to terms with it and process it. And I think about like sitting here thinking about you talking about the experience. Think about the social narratives that are kind of like floating around in society when a parent does go to prison or jail. What do we tell our kids when they say, "Where's mommy or daddy?" What do we tell them? Yeah, they're away. Oh, they're working or they're in school. Because we don't even want our children to confront the trauma of what the social narrative of a parent in prison is, right? And how inadequate and shameful that is for a child to even confront.
And even socially for that child, like you go to school and the other kids know your parents are locked up. Yeah. And, what the impact that has on them. Because
you can't possibly be a good person while you're in prison, right? You can't possibly be a good father while you're in prison in terms of how society kind of thinks about people. And this is why we need to start re-envisioning.
Well, I just want to be, I want to be clear about this, Brandon, because I think it's important to say. I think it's important to name it. You know what I mean? Like when you say good father, you know what I mean? That's opposed to a bad father. And that is, right? That's, when I think of that, like I couldn't be a good father in prison. Mm-hmm. It's impossible for me to be a good father in prison because my kids need me. They need my time. That's what above anything else, above all else, above the videotape, the this, the that, the letters. I used to write my kids use free stamps to write my kids, right? I didn't hear from it. Like that's all fine. Well, and fine. They need me. They need my time. Yeah. That's the only thing. And so it's really not about being good or bad at that point, right? At some moment, it's not about good or bad. The reality is that I am not there.
Yeah. But I'm even talking about just like to have a child with a parent in prison, like. You might like, because you're right, you need to be there, but you might be doing all the right things and like planning and becoming better, right? Like healing and doing all this, but like that child's community is never going to conceive that their parent is a good person, somebody who cares, who wants to be
You're
a father.
Absolutely right about that.
And no matter how much you're trying to transform your life to show up for your child when that time comes. But here's another one of the problems is that with all of the obstacles that prison puts in front of parenting, there's also a thing where, like, if you get a 10-year sentence, we want to believe in society that judges know everything and that like they're making informed decisions and this is all there's an algorithm to figure out who deserves how much prison time. But if you get a 10-year sentence and you have a 2-year-old when you go in, and the judge is telling you you're going to miss 10 years of that child's life, what if after 3 years you've transformed your life completely and you're a better person and you've healed and you've genuinely done all the work you need to do to thrive in society? Well, the court says that despite all that, you have to spend another 7 years away from your child. And that's where the punishment we don't talk about enough. So you can go in and you can make the changes, but our system is not designed to reunify people. Our system is not designed to promote healing and promote growth, because even when you do it, there's very rarely a mechanism for you to prove it and show it and then go home to your family and be the father that your kids need. So now we've got millions, tens of millions of kids in our society with a parent incarcerated who very well could come home and help that child develop and grow through the trauma that they've experienced and all those things. But simply because of a sentencing structure and mandatory minimums and all these other broken parts of the system, you have to stay away from your child for longer than necessary. And that's another thing that I don't think we talk about enough, is that what's necessary versus what's unnecessary. What's too much, right? What effect is incarceration having on our children and our siblings and our parents? And what pathways can we have to actually bring families together instead of continuing to keep them ripped apart? And the interesting thing is, this conversation's so much bigger than just when you're incarcerated. And I just learned this recently, right? I have my first child on the way, and my daughter is due in January, and I'm in a situation where my child is going to be born in Costa Rica, and I'm on probation. And so now I have a million obstacles in front of me, and I've done everything I've done with my life to change who I am. I've become a much better person than when I was when I was 21. And now the idea of parenting, even on probation, seems like an impossibility. And I'm fighting for my life every single day just to be there when my daughter is born, because the system is set up to not critically evaluate what it's doing, right? So, and I have supportive probation officers, and I have supportive family and people in my life, and that all want to see me win and be the best father in the world. But I'm fighting a system that is designed to just hold you beyond any constructive results or beyond any positive growth, beyond everything that we could want from the system. It's designed to hold you, and that continues to affect families. So I might not be there for my daughter's birth. There's a chance that I might not meet my daughter until she's 2 years old, because my partner could potentially not be able to bring her here, and because the system potentially won't let me go there. And so it's all designed to, it's like it just hurts families over and over and over and over again, even beyond the point where there's no need to continue to do that. I don't think there's a need at all ever to do it the way that we're doing it. But your experience in prison, my experience out here, is literally millions of people's experience who go to prison, of just wanting to do better and be a better parent and show up, and just being held back from doing that. And it's like, people just don't even know, and they don't even think about it, and we don't talk about it enough. And it's so important for people to hear about these experiences. And for me, I just, like, the last thing I'll say about my situation right now, like, the wildest thing for me is, I remember being in prison for those 13 years, and I spent maybe 10 of those years just, like, very sad that I didn't have a child, because it's like I wanted to be a father so bad, but then also so happy that I didn't have a child, because I saw how impossible it was for people to parent from in prison, even when they had all the best intentions and wanted to be the absolute best they could be. And so I had this, like, these opposing feelings of, like, wishing that I had a child, but also being so thankful that I didn't. And so I spent 10 years just planning on who I was going to be as a father, and, like, following the example that my dad was setting, showing up for me every single week at visits and becoming my best friend and having open conversation, like, really modeling who I wanted to be as a dad. And I spent years writing letters to my unborn children in journals. And I spent years talking to my friends and family about how one day I can't wait to do this, and I'd give up everything in the world to be a great father. And then I find myself in this, really odd, kind of some pretty unique situation of being on probation and having a child born in a different country, and all the work I did and all of the dreams I had and all of the preparation that I've been doing for 10 years to become an amazing father, I feel like I'm not going to be able to do anything I want to do because I'm on probation, because I made a mistake 17, 16 years ago that continues to follow me, and because of that potentially will follow my daughter as well, because I might not be able to be present. That's a broken system. What you experienced is a broken system. What millions of parents in prison are experiencing is a broken system. And families are suffering so much because of how broken our system is. So it's we have to talk about it. It's like it almost feels like an impossible thing to talk about. But people have to know the effects that these, our systems are having on our kids and our families, and then really put it into perspective how many people are being affected by it. And yeah, I don't know. It's tough, man.
It is tough, but I think if you're a parent, you're in that situation, you have to make it a priority that I'm never coming back to prison again. You know what I mean? Is that what you would say? Like, what would you say to anybody who's in prison right now with a child and they're just sitting, trying to figure this whole parenting thing from prison out? What would be the advice that you would give them? The advice that I would give them is work on yourself as much as possible. Accept the circumstances that you are in. Mm-hmm. And also understand that your children, depending on how old they are, sometimes you've done some things and you've been away from them and it's really hurtful to them. And they need time they need you to finish your sentence and get out and show them that you're going to be okay. You know what I mean? Like, that's what they need. To be a good father, sometimes it's like, or a good mother, I have to step back for a minute. I have to get my shit together, right? And no matter what that looks like. And it's time, you know what I mean? Like, there was a period of time that me and my daughter, since we've gone through phases we have a great relationship now, but it's taken a long time to get there. Yeah. Right. And the only way we got there, it's taken so long. It's taken a lot to get there to where we're at now. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's taken a lot for me personally to give her space when she needed it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. To not interfere with her life and try to push, all I want her to do is say, "Dad, I forgive you," right? You know what I mean? Like, and I'll carry that around, but I gotta get that's in her time, not mine. Yeah. Right? I have to hold that because I went to prison. I wasn't doing good things, man. I hurt a lot of people, man. That's the fact of the matter is I hurt people. You know what I mean? I did things that put me in prison. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And part of the consequence of that was people needed time to stay away from me to heal up. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Because I hurt people. I hurt my family. I hurt my community. And people needed time. And so, if the advice that I'm saying is that, no matter how much it hurts, people need their own time to get through what they need to get through. And that's your child or not, because you say it's my child, but she's not actually my possession. Yeah. Right? My son's not my possession. He's his own man. She's her own woman, right? And so I can't control their experience. I can be there for them. You know what I'm saying? I can do all that, but I also need to hear their truths about my behavior, about what happened for me, about why I was removed from my home, right? I couldn't be a father. They need to know that wasn't their fault. You know what I mean? And so when I show up and it's all about me, and you know what I mean? Trying to make some excuse for what happened to me or what the damage that ain't gonna work, man. Kids, they need to hear the truth and exclude my feelings from it. Mm-hmm. Exclude my pride from the process, right? Mm-hmm. I need to get real with my kids and I need to live it every day after that, because I can make apologies. I can say I'm sorry, right? But the only thing that is going to show my children that or my daughter in particular that wasn't me is by never doing those things again and living the right way and showing up for her when she needs me, or being present when she's around me. You know what I mean? That's how I become a good father.
Yeah. Yeah, man, it's a super heavy topic, and I think this is one that we'll continue to unpack, right? Like, I think we need to hear from some mothers. I think we need to hear from some kids. I think we need to, I think we need to get this conversation, continuing to evolve and showing people the complexity of the effects of incarceration on families. But I think that your advice is wise, man. I think at the end of the day, like the way to be the best, most solid parent is to be the best, most solid person, right? And heal from the things that you got to heal from, and like you said, give your kids time to heal from the things that they need to heal from in the ways that they need to heal from them. And like as always, we appreciate everybody taking the time to listen to us have this conversation, and we're going to keep it going. We're going to do definitely a few episodes on the effects of incarceration on family. And as always, man, thanks for being vulnerable and sharing your story. And we'll just continue to kind of like show people that there's got to be a better way to do these things, man. There's got to be a better way to talk about them and experience them. So thanks for everybody for listening and supporting the podcast, and stay tuned. We got more content, more episodes coming, and sending big love to all you out there, and anybody who's experienced a family member being incarcerated. We hold you on our hearts, and we definitely relate to that. So thank you.